floating out of their bodies. And this one guy that the captain talked to, I think his name was Jose, he'd had a malformed foot. He was born that way. And he looked down at his foot and he said, Jose, look, your foot is fine. It's not malformed anymore. And then they all went higher into greater realms, and they met loved ones who died and gone on before and went into the light. And that was principally their experience. But, of course, the biggie was the captain noticing Jose's foot. And the next biggie, I think, was that all of them told the same story without ever having discussed it with each other first. In other words, the investigators went around and talked to them all in the hospital. They were in different rooms. They didn't have a chance to talk to each other.
Wow. You know, when I read that, I really wanted you to talk about that, share a little bit about it to the audience, because that's a very firmly documented case.
Yes.
Of all these men really dying, having a near-death experience, and then...
Well, they either died or nearly died. You know, there's no way you can say about vital signs except that they seemed dead and they were rushed to the hospital.
You talk about something called previews, showing history and the future. Explain this to us.
Well, some people do have previews. They're able to see the future in their near-death experience. One woman saw the man she would marry, saw him very clearly. And what's really interesting to me in her case was she saw him dressed as if they had been married in a past life. In other words, he was wearing that particular kind of clothing of that era, and that she would marry him again in this life. And she did. She wasn't even going with him at the time, hadn't even met him. Another one was the bombs dropping over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And a woman, in her near-death experience, she was a child experiencer, saw this, and in a spirit form, a soul form, went over there to help the dying from the A-bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that didn't, and then came back and, into her body, re-entered her body and revived from her near-death experience. And none of this ever happened. She didn't even know what that mushroom cloud was for another, a couple of decades, decade and a half, couple of decades, when the actual bomb was dropped. So do you call that a preview or, I don't know the timing on that one. Many of them do see things like with my child experiencers. Every once in a while, they will see a future sibling, and they'll see that sibling is coming in, and they'll know what that sibling's name is going to be, and a little bit about that sibling. Another woman experienced her life as she was, and this is another child experiencer, seeing her life, what she would do in an occupation, who she would marry, how many children she would have, the football games that she would go to, even the name of the teams, the colors, and it all really happened just that way.
Interesting. I have a question for you that's perplexed me throughout even the original conversations that we had, the first show that we did together. In our understanding of memory and recall, you have to be, quote, awake on some level or still living in your body still functioning to have memory and to have recall. But someone who is physically dead but is not really dead yet because they're going to return to their body, that body will awaken. I think it's fascinating how they're able to have recall about these other worlds and these revelations and these experiences when the body is clinically dead. That clearly tells us we're not our body. It totally validates that in the most profound way.
Well, it certainly indicates that the soul is real and that the soul is primary. Not our personality, not our brain, the soul.
So describe, at least at this point in your life, your frame of reference for what a soul is so we have a context for it. We all have a sense of it, but we don't know what the it is. Do you?
Oh, that's a big one.
I know.
I'm going to have to get real personal here because I saw my soul in my second near-death experience. And it was just a wee spark. It was like a spark of fire. And it was very small. But yet it was so huge and so powerful with the energy it emanated and the harmonics it emanated. It was just stunning to me how incredibly powerful our soul is, yet how minuscule if you're looking at volume and size and this kind of thing. And I also discuss in the book a little bit about the soul and some experiments that were done in hospitals in the earlier part of the 20th century, and they had permission, of course, and with the dying individual, and they put them on a scale and measure them before they died, and as they're dying, and after they have died. And there were actually several hospitals that did this. The original hospital, and then several follow-ups years later, and they all found that the soul weight, or that there was weight loss at death, and that weight loss was somewhere between about 3/4 of an ounce and a whole ounce. And that just seems so minuscule, but yet for the scientific community, where did the ounce go? And then one guy was conjecturing, and he said, well, look at how much a microchip can hold. And a whole ounce? That could hold almost like universal knowledge.
Isn't it true that when many people die, they urinate or they defecate if they have anything left in their system?
That's true. The body openings do open. Sure.
Yes. So the people on the clinical realm who are by the book may say that this study can't really be valid because the body releases stuff through the body openings at death.
Sometimes it releases it right away, sometimes not. Sometimes, there's a little bit of a delay.
Right.
But what we're finding with these cases is that the body can still be reanimated and lived in. So I can't tell you if it released liquids before or after. I can only say that the body was livable. Now, in one case that we know of that is documented, fully documented, and that's of George Ritchie. And George Ritchie, of course, was the first near-death experiencer that Raymond Moody had ever heard of. George, by then, was a psychiatrist in Richmond, Virginia, and Raymond Moody was here in Charlottesville, where I live, and heard George Ritchie give his talk about his own near-death experience. And in George's case, and again, this is all fully documented, and I think the book is returned from tomorrow. Anyway, George died. It was military installation, and he got some kind of a pneumonia or something. Anyway, he died. And they tried everything to revive him, couldn't. And it did absolutely everything. So, the white sheet over the head kind of thing. And he was taken to the body was taken to the morgue. And he was in the morgue at the base hospital. And it was full of a lot of people who had died, and sheets over, the white sheet over the body. And as George tells it, he was at the point in his episode where it was time to go back to his body, and he couldn't find it. He went back to the room; it wasn't there. went to the morgue, you know.